Thank you very much, Malta, and a very good evening to you all. Thank you very much for joining in. And a huge shout out to the Share Screen Africa for hosting us. It's an absolute pleasure to be talking to you today. We'll just be talking about stories. All right, so as I was mentioning, we're just talking about stories and how it could be a powerful tool into addressing one of our most pressing challenge, climate change. A little bit background about myself. I was privileged enough to grow up in a family of, in a very big family of 8 siblings. So you can imagine we really had lots of stories. You never got bored. And I very much recall vividly anytime my mom wanted to teach us various life lessons or counsel us in one way, she always did this through stories. And I do recall so well that when she was about to she taught me about sexual reproductive health using stories. So stories have been part of my life, part of my being, and I very much recognize how much this has impacted my values, but also how I perceive things. But one of the stories that I always had nothing to do with what I'm about to talk today now, and it's not something that we really did discuss even in schools. Climate change and the happening in the environment. I grew up in an urban setting, and growing up, I never thought it was a challenge. I could see in the news like floodings happening, droughts, but it was never a question of why is it happening and who should be solving it. Somebody needed to intervene. Until in university, when then I sat down and then recognized that I was actually the somebody and I had to play my part. So this is where the love for conservation came in. And I do this using 3 different approaches, of which one is climate policy advocacy, education, as well as entrepreneurship. But today, I very much want us to go deep into the climate storytelling, because I believe it's really one of the powerful tools, yet one a little bit ignored in our tackle for climate change. So, but by the end of this presentation, I'm very much hoping that at least we'll have a clear overview or an understanding of behavior change and how it influences our climate action. Like, why is it the most critical part in solving the climate peace puzzle? And how could storytelling be used as a powerful tool into solving it? And later on, we will go deep into some of the influential factors of storytelling and what should a good story or a good sustainability story entail, and later on how your personal stories could be also leveraged as a climate solution. Next. All right, this is too familiar. I think it's still fresh, COVID-19, and I think it's one of the pandemic, one of the global challenge that has been, like, everyone really did understand what COVID-19 was. We could hear this from coffee shops, from bus stations. We could hear this from hospitals, from church funerals, clubs. Everyone really did understand what COVID-19 was because everyone had an equal role to play into solving it. COVID-19 has most of the time forced us to change the way we do things, the way we live, and it has openly opened like wide doors for various and rare opportunities. And these behavior scientists do refer to it as a fresh start, which is mostly referred as the fact that now human are now more tending to take action towards achieving a goal after a special occasion. So in this case, it was COVID-19. But it's also important to recognize that it didn't really happen in a vacuum. Every individual action, every community action, and every national action had something to play with the spread of the virus, but also how we solve it, like how we stop the spread. And this is now where the critical part of individual behavior plays in. I remember I also got COVID, and we had to confine ourselves, making sure you don't really contaminate or spread the virus to your loved ones. And I think it was critical because now everyone was very much intentional in either what you eat. Some of us started even exercising, something we never did before. So this is just a little shift that happened. And I think as one of the critical parts that came in within the COVID pandemic. And now that we're facing climate change, how could this equally apply? And what the missing ingredient in this climate sphere. So something that I believe we have very much undervalued, like ignored in the climate sphere, and during even something that we learned during COVID-19 was the role of human behavior in research, but also in its investment. How much do we value human behavior in solving global challenges? And I think this is not something that we need to be repeating while solving the climate crisis. So now that we continue to pressure our governments, our corporate, but also businesses to take climate action very seriously, but also urgently, we actually need to be investing and focusing on human behavior in a newer and broader way to ensure that we are actually addressing the problem and giving it attention as it deserves. At the moment, we are on track to pass the 2 degrees Celsius threshold of temperature increase, at which climate change has been deemed to be catastrophic to human. And now for us to minimize carbon emission, but also to ensure that human well-being is maximized, then we need to be changing our action, but also transforming our little intervention into sustainable behaviors leading to sustainable societies by the end of the day. But I have been always asked how much individuals could play a role into solving such an enormous problem, and it's very evident, and you really have the right to even be questioning it, because we're now close to 1.2 billion people. So how much could your action really make a difference? By the end of the day, you are just an individual. But what if I told you that actually you might be wrong? Because we'll have to go deep into the 3 highlighted points, especially on your size of carbon footprint, which we'll discuss later on, but also how your individual action dictates the macro, which happens to be the society or the majority. And later we'll go deep into our qualities. We're social beings, and we're very much attached to our people and our community. And then this also influences us. So although you're just one person, as you might be thinking, yes, you are, but the size of your carbon footprint the amount of global greenhouse gas emission attributed to you will really shock you. This is a little bit of statistics on carbon emission per capita. And you can see that the most emerging economies happens to be the one with more carbon footprints per individual, per citizen. And 1 ton of carbon emission, this is equals to 1,000 kilograms. So that's really not a small amount. Normally, everyone produces several tons of global greenhouse gas emission per year. And now I'm guessing that this numbers means as much to you as it does to me, which is probably nothing. Next. And I think it's complex to understand the numbers because our minds are not wired to these statistics, but rather to narratives, and we'll get to understand this as we go on. Now let's try to break it a little bit down. I took a few statistics from the carbon footprint per capita in Saudi Arabia. This was now equaling to 18.2 tons. Now, if we're to give a little equivalence on how much this is, this could fill the 3 status of liberty. That's shocking. I don't think we're expected to hear this. I think this is really very massive. And now you can imagine if it was to be 1.5 years later, your own carbon footprint will be equaling to 18.2 tons, which is 19,000 kilograms. And I think this is a very huge number to the carbon emissions. And imagine if we keep doing the same habits, then how many status of liberty will be filling. All right, so it also goes beyond just carbon emissions and maybe being mindful of the energy we choose to use, or the food we choose to eat, the transport we choose to take, all the things. But it also, you as an individual, yes, you are one, but it also affects people around you as a micro. And this is because mostly we assume that maybe if you are assigned or you are an elected official or you are a CEO, then this is where your impact could really make a difference in the climate sphere. But if you actually analyze it, you'll find that you're holding power, you're holding massive power into solving this climate peace puzzle. So your individual action, which means the people you vote, but also the money you choose, the companies and resources and you choose to invest in all these amounts to your power. But also this can't just be one person, so it requires enough of us, enough of people, enough of individuals for us to be able to have some changes. So we need to be on the same page to activate this massive power that we hold. And you see this with maybe climate activists and the strikes that have been going on with various changes. So each individuals and the power in a collective that then could lead to the change we are holding. But we need just one person to start, or maybe you'll be the one to start. So that's how much one individual's part could really make a difference in the solving of the climate peace puzzle. But now we are human, we are social species. We very much like to interact. We very much like to do what everyone is doing. I don't remember, or I can't imagine how much people we surround ourselves with influences who we are as people. Let's say, for example, if a couple of your friends have been obsessed to a particular movie or a particular dish that they want to test, you'll be tempted to try that dish. And I very much like one of the famous public speaker, Jim, who quoted, you are an average of 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think this is really true. And if you try to analyze it, it's what you're doing, the behavior you have will influence in one way or the other the people you surround your time most, or you surround yourself with. If you choose to go sustainable, you can't really tell who is seeing what you're doing and how much your action could actually influence them to also go sustainable. Let's say if your neighbors are most relying on fossil fuel and you choose to use solar clean energy, then you can't really imagine how much, the more you talk about it, the more you share how effective it is, it might change someone else's to also join you, or the other way around. But then we have various factors that influences how we do things, and maybe why we are more resistant on some of the sustainable climate action. And this could come from either psychological, which means inertia, difficulty in overcoming various habits that we have been very much used to, but also it can come from social aspect of it, either peer pressure or your expectations. Like we expect you to if you're a leader, we expect you maybe to curb your carbon footprints, or we expect you to be more vigilant with the energy sources you use, or conserve the plastics you use, maybe recycle and all those things. So like we have various expectations, but also it can also be culture, like the beliefs and values that you have. And I think this, I was talking with a friend actually the other day, he's from the US, and he was telling me how in his community, mining core is part of their culture, so they hold it dear. So this is something we're saying we need to shift from fossil fuel, but then we have communities that actually rely on this, and you can't tell them that it's not good. It's who says it's bad. Like then there is something that also comes with cultures and beliefs and how we connect to our specific communities, and the interconnectedness of all these issues then influences each individual's behavior. So why stories, why children, and the processing of better information and knowledge about climate change has been mostly through reports, articles, and various other research and publication. So it really didn't bring in radical societal changes as we would expecting. However, such approaches has been proven to be quite slow, and it became evident that we actually needed more. Yes, we need scientific knowledge itself, but then it doesn't make people in society to change, and that's why we need that shift from information provision to storytelling. So storytelling with intention. That would really make sense to the communities, that would make sense to the people, to make sustainable choices, but also to implement and imagine change. But now, who should be telling the stories? Should it be scientists, everyday people, politicians, CEOs, community officers, people all together? And who should be listening and changing? Scientific groups with greater impact, or government, or fossil fuel companies, people and individuals, households? I think I'll just leave this question for us to reflect on who should be telling the stories, and who really need to change and listen. All right, so why storytelling? Storytelling in the first place, it's just its intention. It's first, yes, it's a public narrative, translating the values the story it holds into motivation of action. So storytelling just goes beyond telling you facts and statistics and just telling you a story, but it also has that part of it of communicating to the heart, which communicates then to your emotions and inspires empathy and that willingness of change. So that's why storytelling is really powerful, and I think it's now the right time to be investing into storytelling in the climate sphere itself. So why children? Why not start with the leaders themselves? I think everyone loves stories. But I believe that when I was targeting, like when I was thinking of which actually age group to target for storytelling, anyone could hear stories, but I think children really came close to me because the power of children's stories relies in the audience itself. It's how children are open to new ideas, they invent new words, they do things differently, they ask why pretty much to everything we adults consider for granted. And I believe it is with this curiosity that lies at the heart of learnings. And with this book and with the approach that we're using with storytelling, I think it's just this thing that we want to keep alive, that curiosity in children as they grow. And in this time of climate change, children's ability to imagine alternatives to the way things are done may be the most powerful force of socioeconomic transformation that we need. And here's how we plan to keep it alive. I think we have very much different approaches on how we could storytell, either through movies, through music, through just adventure itself. But I think also literature is one of the elements. And while we are storytelling, especially for sustainability, I think it's very much important to have at least the three different elements. Relatability, which means, yes, you're relating to the communities and the audience you're talking to, but also they can relate to the story that we all share, climate change. And I think we're in a time where we are all living in this environmental change that is happening very rapidly. So whether you deny it or not, it's something that is actually with us. And it should also be authentic in a way that it's real, but it's also, it's very real and true. And emotional resonance. It's just not a fact of telling you that we're passing the Paris Agreement, that's maybe a big word, but we're passing our expected temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius in a way that will scare you and be like, but now we are dying, it's over. I think it should be in a way that, yes, it can connect us, we have that emotion, but it's also inspiring us to go beyond that. Yes, it's happening and it can be solved. So it should be in a way that inspire action. And with this, we can now expect to have impact with the story. We can expect the story to bring in the results that we're expecting for. So with the story, we can surely influence behaviors, and we can, yes, have that emotional attachment. We can bring in empathy with people listening or hearing the story. But by the end of the day, we can also overcome that resistance, because I feel like it makes us a bit ready for the unknown. Which also gives us that tool that we need to face the uncertainty with ease. But also by the end of the day, we have that shared responsibility and sustainability efforts that everyone is playing a part. And then as a collective, we can say that we are headed to the right place. We are actually solving the climate piece puzzle within time. So why stories? Here we're now more on the personal stories. We're coming close to the end of the presentation. I'm sure you're familiar. Maybe this face looks familiar. This is Hosi. Hosi is actually a South African. He died in 2001 of HIV and AIDS, and I think he's one of the child that really touched hearts of the many during his speech, I think in 2000, where he was addressing to more than 10,000 people, audience. And here he was mostly advocating for inclusion of people living with HIV and AIDS. And from his quote, I quote, "Care for children and accept us. We are all human beings. We are normal. We have hands. We have feet. We can walk. We can talk. We have needs just like everyone else. Don't be afraid of us." And this has really changed our approach to how we view people, but it has also touched emotions of the many. And this is how personal stories could really be one of the approach to invoke that action even in the climate space. We also have people like Malala, who happen to be also an education advocate for girls' education in Pakistan. She has also studied this a bit young, at the age of 17. And these are all personal stories. And finally, he was attacked for his advocacy. He was shot in the head. But all this has challenged us to actually view things differently. And that one individual, that one story that makes a difference. And lastly, we have someone like Greta, who also is a climate advocate. All this started young, but it doesn't mean that we don't have like older people. And I'm quite sure that in your specific community, you know that one person who has a story that has really impacted you as an individual, or even you're that same person whom you don't really know how your story has changed people and has really contributed to their being, and maybe has changed how they approach things and the decision they come up with. So it's stories like this, it's personal stories like this that really makes a huge difference. And I think in the climate sphere, we also need more stories like this, like more authentic stories that speak to the hearts, that speak to the people. Now, I think now it's our turn to really make our part. And I can't really imagine what could happen if children themselves, they were equipped with climate literacy from kindergarten all the way to high school across all subject area. I can't really imagine if we equipped them with story-rich examples to help them understand what is at stake and how they can be agents of change. Or what if we empowered everyone with vocabulary and concepts to articulate a vision of sustainability and equitable future? And lastly, can we even imagine if we gave teachers, parents, leaders, among many, many other people, resources where they can find books, films, musics, and other formats for teaching and telling climate stories? I thank you very much.
Very well done for persisting, and we're very, very relieved that you you got through. Do you want to just unmute yourself there? So I think for the old faithfuls, everybody knows how to do it, but I'll explain. So either if people can raise their hands, so at the bottom of the screen there is a reactions tool, and there's a reaction that says you click on the little smiley face with a plus, and there's a raise your hand. So if you can, please press on the raise your hand if you would like to talk. That's the easiest way for us to manage it and to see who's in the queue. But if you aren't able to get that right, then you can also raise your hand physically on the screen. There's lots of greetings. There's Jane Quinn. So Jane, if I can ask Marit to unmute you, and then you can feel free to ask your question. And if you're feeling brave, turn on your camera. We want to see your face, and ask Deborah a question, please.
Okay, hi. I think I've got a light in the way.
No, that's
yeah. Deborah, thank you just so much for this. It was really amazing. So I'm a kind of eco-social justice activist educator, so completely fascinated with what you're talking about. I'd love to hear a little bit more, actually, of your stories about where you've used them and the kinds of reactions you've been getting. I really loved all the kind of theory and explanation behind why you're using stories as you are. But I'd also love to hear a little bit of the story of kind of what you've been doing with it, your experiences of it.
Thanks, Jane. Deborah, you just need to unmute yourself again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Jane. It's quite a very interesting question, and I very much would like to share. So with regards to the story, a bit about the book. It's a climate tell book, and it just came to simplify the climate language in a language children could understand. And how do we use it? So far, I have interacted with 2 schools, primary schools mostly. They're based not in the like in city. They are in the other part of the country, in the eastern part. And what happened, actually, it's fun. Given the structure of the book, it's not like a very technical book. Like they have like some caroling pages on what sustainability looks like, and they have examples of maybe drought and plastic pollution. it's not something they see in their own specific region, but it's also good that at least they have that visuals in the book. And it was, at first, it was entertaining. Yes, I would say it was entertaining, but I realized that actually it was stopping just from there. It's, yes, I read now, I understand, which is good, at least now you know. But now we incorporated into a play, like Learn as You Play, where now we can go in the environment. Like, now that we read it, can we go in the outer space and see it? Can we go and see maybe that that landfill that is just packed there? Can we understand it now in reality, just not in the books? And I think that's where now we saw a very great interest in it. If we're talking about conservation and indigenous species and all those, that can we go in that ecosystem in the space and actually see it? And I think this is really where I think I saw that connection between them and the environment, but we weren't able to do as much as we want to do, either because of the school curriculum, but also the budget. But I think really that learn through play was one of the approach that I think is quite very interesting to do it.
Great, Jane. Thanks very much for your question. Do you want to add anything further to that, or you happy with the answer?
Thank you. Yeah, I just would like to say, I imagine maybe you have worked with Paulo Freire's work, just because of that, the issue of the emotive content and code. And for me, that's a lovely trajectory to use in the way that you're doing this work, because for adults as much as children, in the way of finding that relatability to your own life experience in a way that connects the head and heart to the actions. So yeah, just a lot more to talk about, but I'll find a way to be in contact with you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane, for your questions. There's Andy Klee. Let me find you, Andy. Spelling order. There we go.
Well, thanks, Marty, and thanks, Deborah. That was a fantastic presentation. I think, like everybody else, we're all really impressed and agreeing with your sort of thesis that actually framing the problems and things we're facing as a story is massively important, and it's what humans get. And you can kind of become part of the story if it's well told. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at. I suppose my question is, how do we cut through all the other noise and chatter out there that's going on and really get people to latch onto this particular story, rather than perhaps some of the doom and gloom and the humans are superior to everything else and we matter, nothing other than living stuff doesn't, and all those sorts of things. It's not much of a question. I just wanted to sort of keep the conversation going as much as anything, but I think it's wonderful. The clip was fantastic. I wanted to be in that story straight away and be part of that adventure to make the world as beautiful as it's shown there. How do we get more people, to ignore the other rubbish that's out there and get amongst it, I suppose.
Deborah, do you want to?
Sorry, not much of a question, but I was trying.
No, I'm sure Deborah will give you a response.
That's really a very, I think it's really interesting. I myself, I haven't very much been reflecting on it, but I think the best way to do it is like encouraging people to tell their stories, but also I can't ignore that there are lots of things going on, and sometimes you even meet climate deniers themselves. I myself, I met some. So I think it's just building that foundation and having rounds in things that you really know needs to be done right, because I believe we also have that conscious of I know what's right and wrong, and you can really tell with the actions you're doing. So if we're able to genuinely tell our stories and be honest with us and with ourselves and the stories we are telling, I think along the way we can't really project impact. I myself, I can tell maybe within this book who might find it very interesting and maybe influence them to make things. Some of them might just find it as something that is just there, as any normal book you can read. So I think it's you just play your part. That's what I believe. You just play your part and tell your story with hopes that you influence one person here or there, but also, just have your ground and your boundaries, because you will have quite a lot of pressure coming on the other end. So yeah, I think, and also being in a cycle of people whom you have like the same values and understanding, at least it keeps you going. You see that you're not alone.
No,
I think
brilliant.
I tried there.
No, it's awesome. And what a great speaker to have on the night before International Women's Day. So great work. Thank you very much. It's a real inspiration. Take care.
Cool, thanks, Andy. And I'm sure you tell your kids lots of stories in the initiatives that you do. So
yeah, they run for it when they see me coming now. Anyway, there we go. Dr. Ogilvie will have a much better question than I ever could. There we go. Cheers, guys.
So before we get to Dr. Ogilvie, because I know she's a patient person, we wanted to just ask you, Deborah, where can people get their hands on the book? You've done a good job of showing everybody and they're wanting to get into it. Can you tell us about where people can get it? And then we'll go to Dr. Ogilvie. And I'm sure the word doing plays and acting got her going. So we'll wait for her.
Oh yeah, definitely. The book we're trying to actually make it available like for international sales, like maybe on Kindle, Amazon, and all that. But it's yet to be made available. However, there is a link for expression of interest, of which thank you very much, Malette. She just shared it in the group. So there, at least I could have your details and I'll give you a heads up once it's readily available. But people on ground, the book is very available for yeah, you can just get it.
In Rwanda.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks very much. And we'll go to Dr. Ogilvie. I think she can turn on her camera too. Come on.
Sorry, Marty, I'm in Pretoria, so my bandwidth is a bit bad. So if I put my camera on, it's just going to bomb out.
No, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I don't normally like talking without actually doing face-to-face. But Deborah, I would like to say thank you. That's amazing. And I firmly believe stories do work. I've seen it work with children. And what is nice is that children actually start to react and their behavior does change through storytelling because education must be fun and rewarding. But the question I wanted to ask is Marty asked it. I wanted to know where we could get the book because I think it's going to be something amazing, which I can link into my lectures. And then also the link to that little clip-in that you put in. If possible, I've got a conference coming on and I'm actually doing ways and means of how to get messages across. Last year, I did puppets and mascots. And this year, strangely enough, I'm doing stories and storytelling. So if I can use your link, I'll give you credit to show them how effective it can and how it is. And yeah, but once again, thank you, Deborah. It was amazing. And I'm glad most of my advanced students are on tonight. And this is a test question, guys. I use every opportunity, but thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ogilvie.
And with that, I think we can say good night, unless there are more hands going up. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for being part of it.
Yeah. See you all next week at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening.
Bye.